Welcome to Robin on the Farm. Today I'm showing you how to make this beautiful loaf of Artesian Everything Bagel bread. Let's get started. This Artesian Everything Bagel bread is so easy to put together. Let me just show you how to make it. You're going to start with 1 3/4 cups of hot water. You want this to be like warm bath water. You want it to be warm enough to activate your yeast, but not hot enough to kill it. And it should be about 110 degrees if you want to get really technical. But I just turn my tap all the way to hot and let it run for a minute, and then it is perfect. So warm bath water, if you think of that, that'll be the perfect temperature for this. So 1 3/4 cups of hot water. And our next ingredient is oil. I'm going to use some of this olive oil. You can use any kind of oil that you want, maybe some coconut oil or sunflower oil, but 2 tablespoons of oil. I went ahead and measured it out just to make it a little bit easier for me. So 2 tablespoons of oil, put it right on into your bread machine pan. And our next ingredient is salt. I'm going to use some of this North American pink salt, but you can use plain old white table salt if you want. I store a ton of this, but this is just kind of fun. This is kind of some fancy salt. I think it's really pretty. It's pink, it's beautiful. So 1 teaspoon, just put it right on into your bread machine pan. And our next ingredient is sugar. You want 1 teaspoon of sugar. Your sugar will help your yeast to activate, but since this is just such a small amount of sugar, if you really don't want to use any sugar in your bread, you can get away with leaving it out in this recipe. So I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of sugar right into the pan. And next we need our flour. You can use all-purpose flour in this bread. I'm going to use bread flour. I have a ton of bread flour stored, and I use bread flour sometimes and I use all-purpose flour sometimes. The bread flour will have a higher protein content. You'll get a better rise out of your breads, a little bit different texture. So I prefer bread flour, but all-purpose flour will work just fine. Most people buy all-purpose flour, and if that's what you have, use that in your bread. So for this recipe, we want 4 cups of flour. So just measure that out and put it right into your pan. Okay, 4 cups. And our last ingredient is the yeast. This is my active dry yeast. This is my Red Star brand. I've been using this stuff for years and years. I love this yeast. But you can also use bread machine yeast, rapid rise, instant. Anything will work just fine. So I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of yeast. Put that right on into your bread machine pan on top of the flour. You can make a little well if that's how you've always done it, but you really don't have to. I keep my yeast in the freezer. I pull it out right in time to make bread. You don't have to let it come to room temperature or anything like that, but it'll keep your yeast good forever. So that's what I recommend doing with your yeast. Okay, those are all of our ingredients in this super simple Artesian Everything Bagel bread. Now I'm going to throw it into my bread machine. This is my Zojireshi bread machine. I love my bread machine so much. I have used a ton of bread machines over the past 22 years, and I love this bread machine. Okay, so this is a dough cycle recipe, so I am going to choose the dough cycle and press start. This is going to take an hour and a half. It's going to mix up our ingredients, knead them, and let them rise. And at the end of an hour and a half, when the dough cycle is done, then I'm going to get out the dough and I'm going to shape it into a loaf and throw it in the oven to bake. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to show you what your ball of dough should look like, because that is the most important part of making this bread. If your dough looks good, then you know your bread is going to turn out good. If it's too wet or too dry, your bread is not going to turn out. So I will show you in just a minute what this should look like. All right, my dough has been kneading for 6 minutes, so let's take a look at this dough. Okay, do you see this? This is a problem. This is not what we want it to look like. And I could tell I was filming, I wasn't measuring very precisely. I had a little bit less than 4 cups of flour in there. So if your dough looks like this, if it's sticking to the bottom, sticking to the paddles, sticking to the sides, looks really tacky, that is too wet. I'm gonna add about 1/8 of a cup more of flour until it starts pulling away from the bottom and it comes together a little bit better. So I'm just going to add that flour right on top of the dough and let it get all incorporated, and it should start looking better. If that's not enough, then I'm gonna add another 1/8 of a cup and see what it looks like then. I've given it a chance to mix up a little bit, and look at that. It is not sticking to the bottom anymore, so now it has the right amount of flour. I added about 1/8 of a cup more, and that did the trick. So you never want to add too much flour so you don't get a dense bread, but you want to have enough so that it comes together like this. You definitely don't want it sticky or your bread could collapse. So this is looking great. If yours is looking crumbly or anything like that, then go ahead and add about 1 tablespoon of water until it looks like this. So now that I know that my ball of dough is looking great, I can shut the door and be confident that this bread is going to turn out wonderfully. It's been an hour and a half and the dough cycle is complete. Look at that dough. Look how nicely it rose. Okay, it's time to get it out and shape it. This is the Artisian Everything Bagel bread. The dough rose great in the bread machine. Now it's time to turn it out and shape it into a boule. A boule is B-O-U-L-E, and it means round ball. Okay, so we're gonna shape this dough into a boule. So you're gonna take some flour and just smear it all over your counter. You don't want too much flour. It'll make the dough hard to come together, but you just want a nice little dusting of flour on your clean countertop. Now, usually I will punch down my dough at this point. This time I'm not gonna punch it down. I'm just gonna kind of turn it out really gently onto this flour. One of my paddles came out. Make sure you get that out. Okay, this looks fantastic. Okay, now I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit more flour on top of this. This will just make it a little bit easier to work with. I'm just gonna shape this into a round ball. So basically I am just going to lift up the sides and bring them into the middle. See that? Just really simply pull it up into the middle and let it all meet right there in the middle. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm gonna flip it over and this will be the top of our boule. Now I'm just gonna use my hands like this. I'm gonna pull it into me and then I'm gonna flip it. I'm gonna pull it in, flip it, pull it in. And this is gonna give us some really nice surface tension so that we get a nice rounded top on this bread. So flip it, pull it in, and it really makes it stand up nicely. You see how nicely it's standing up? And that is all it takes to shape your dough into a boule. Now that this is shaped so nicely, I'm gonna take a piece of parchment paper and I'm gonna just gently lift this dough and put it on the parchment paper. Kept it shaped nicely, it looks good. Now I'm gonna take a bowl and I am just going to put this parchment paper and the dough in the bowl. And I'm gonna let it rise in this bowl for about 30 minutes. This artesian bread is a Dutch oven bread, so I'm gonna bake it in a Dutch oven. I'm gonna use this big cast iron Dutch oven, but you don't have to have one of these to be able to bake your bread. You can come up with lots of different things. I could use something like this because it has a lid and it's oven safe, but I have leftovers in this right now, so I'm not gonna use this. I have this cast iron Dutch oven, so this works great, but you can use a bowl. You can cover a bowl with tin foil. That would work great too. So even if you don't have one of these, don't let that deter you from making this bread because you can come up with a lot of simple ways to make your own little Dutch oven. So while our dough is rising, I'm gonna throw this into the oven at 450 degrees so that this gets nice and hot. Okay, y'all, check out our dough. It's been rising for 30 minutes and it looks fantastic. During that time, my oven preheated to 450 degrees, my Dutch oven got nice and hot, and now it's time for the next step. This next step will take this bread from artesian bread to artesian everything bagel bread. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. If you don't wanna do everything bagel to this bread, you can just throw it in to your Dutch oven right now, throw it in the oven and bake it, but I'm gonna turn it into everything bagel bread because it is delicious. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this out and put it on my counter. Look at this dough. Look at that. Look how great that looks. It's like a perfect ball. It's nice and rounded on the top. Oh, looks great. Okay, So I'm gonna make this into Everything Bagel bread by using Everything Bagel seasoning. I love this seasoning. I use it on my buns, I use it on French bread, it's great. Next time I buy some, I'm gonna buy a big bulk jar of it because it's a way better deal in the big bulk jars. But I just have this little tiny one right now. But I'm gonna make an egg wash for this dough. How you make an egg wash is you crack an egg into a bowl and you add a teaspoon of water. You can also add milk if you want to, but I'm gonna add a teaspoon of water and I'm just going to whisk it up really quick. Let's give it a good little whisk, get it nice and yellow. This is what you want your egg wash to look like. This looks great. I just whisked it up for a second. Now it's time to paint this all over our dough. I'm gonna use this brush. You can use a bristle brush. This one cleans up really well, but if you don't have something like this, sometimes I just use my hands and I just kind of pour it all over and rub it around with my hands. This will make it a little bit easier, a little less messy. So I'm gonna paint this egg wash very gently all over my dough. You definitely don't want to press down on your dough. You just barely want to touch it so that your dough doesn't deflate. That is not what you want to happen right now. You also don't want to use too much egg wash. You just want a nice thin layer. This is going to make your bread a really beautiful golden color. It's going to make it a little bit crispier on the outside, and it's also going to help our Everything Bagel seasoning to stick to it. So this is an important step, I think. It'll give you that look that you're going for. But if you don't have a brush, use your hands, find something else that you can just spread it all over this dough with. So just take a second to do that. The most important part is to not deflate your bread. Okay, so that's looking good. Now I'm gonna grab my Everything Bagel seasoning. Like I said, I love this stuff and I'm gonna buy a way bigger bottle of it next time because it's a way better deal. This is just from Walmart. You can really find it everywhere. I saw that Costco had a nice big bulk container of it for just not even double the price of this, and it was way more. So I'm gonna use about 2 or 3 tablespoons of this Everything Bagel seasoning. You can get creative if you want and use something totally different. Just any kind of seasoning would be good on this. Any kind of herbs, anything. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure this is kind of covered all over the edges. Oh, this is gonna taste so good. Use as much as you want. If you like this Everything Bagel seasoning, use a bunch. If you don't want it to be so strong or you're not sure if you like it yet, then don't use as much. But this looks great. Okay, from here, it's time to put it into our nice and hot Dutch oven. This Dutch oven is super hot, so don't forget that you got it out of the oven and burn yourself. Be really careful. Okay, so now I'm just gonna grab the edges of this parchment paper and really carefully put it into the Dutch oven. Because again, you don't want your dough to deflate. You want to be really careful with it. Just gonna put that in there really carefully. Here we go. So this parchment paper is totally fine to bake in the oven. It's not gonna catch on fire or anything like that. Okay, so check out this dough. Isn't it beautiful? Oh, I love this bread. It's gonna be even prettier when it comes out of the oven. So I'm gonna put the top on. And like I said, the oven is at 450 degrees. I'm gonna put this in there and let it bake for 30 minutes. And then I'm gonna take the top off and let it bake for an additional 10 minutes. And then it's gonna be ready, and it's gonna be beautiful, and it's gonna be delicious. So I'll show it to you when I get it out of the oven. It has been 30 minutes. I am going to take the top off of my Dutch oven and get a peek at the bread. Oh my goodness, it looks so good. Okay, I'm gonna let this bake for another 10 minutes. Check it out. Here's our Artesian Everything Bagel bread, fresh out of the oven. Isn't it gorgeous? I think it is so pretty. And it smells so good. This Everything Bagel seasoning, oh, it's gonna be good bread. But I wanted to show it to you fresh out of the oven. I'm gonna let it cool and then I'm gonna slice into it so you can see it, but I'm gonna go ahead and get it out of this Dutch oven so it can cool off really well. If you leave it in your Dutch oven, it's gonna keep baking because it's so hot. Oh my goodness, this looks gorgeous. Look at that bread. Isn't that so pretty? Oh, I just love it. I just love the round loaf. It's just different, a little more special than just a traditional loaf pan loaf. Oh, I just think it's so fun. Okay, I'm gonna let this cool and then I'm gonna cut into it and show it to you. I've let our bread cool just a little bit. And I want to go ahead and cut into it so that we can see the inside of this gorgeous bread. I love the rustic look of this round loaf. I wanted you to see this texture inside. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? What a gorgeous loaf of bread. We love this bread just cut and eaten plain like this. Put a little butter on it. It's really great toasted, but it just has so much flavoring with that Everything Bagel seasoning that you really don't need to do much else to it. It is so good, just fresh or as leftovers. It's a fantastic thing to go with dinner. Thank you so much for being here with me on Robin on the Farm. I will leave the recipe down in the description. I'll put a link that you can click on and you can print it, save it, share it. If you would share this video with your friends or family, I would appreciate it so much. Thanks so much for being here with me on Robin on the Farm. I'll see you next time.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough. With flour on her apron, loving each need, ground wheat fresh, sowing her seed.